And then behind him, I will call him the knob twiddler. He, I loved him because he's so funny. He was very deliberate in all of his actions.
Like the release of the buttons, like that's just gonna burn me if I keep touching it. You know?
I did exactly that motion, the reaction. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Audiophiles. Fucking chicken. My name's John. His name's Andy, and we're here to listen to music. But first, I got it blue. I got it bad. I got the sweetest sadness I ever had as the hours pass before my eyes, as the hours pass before me, when you're lustful, when you're lonely, and the heat is rising slowly. More on that later. But we have a tune to listen to, selected by my compadre Andy. Andy, what have you got for us?
We are going to be revisiting a band that we're both familiar with, but from an album that you are less so. And we've reacted to a track by them off the same album. We did The Rifle Spiral by the Shins. Yep. Now we're going to do the title track from that album called Port of Morrow. And this particular version is a live version from that show, the Basement. I believe you're probably from. Yeah, it's a great. Yeah, they do great live performances on the Basement. So we are going to check out their version of Port of Morrow on the Basement. And I would like to hear what you have to say about this song and this performance.
Do you know, I'm just trying to think who I've seen. I've definitely seen Radiohead on the Basement. That was a seminal performance.
Yeah, well, isn't it done by like the guy that isn't the guy that does the Basement their producer? Like, is it
I don't
Nigel?
know much about it.
Yeah, Nigel Godrich, is that his name?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. He's. I believe that it was the show. The Basement was created by him. So, yes, you're right. The Radiohead performance was like sort of the seminal episode.
I'll be interested to see this then.
Yeah, awesome. Well,
okay, you've told me into it. I'll give it a go.
Excellent, man. We'll come back and let me know what you think.
Will do.
No way down. We've got to do port.
Okay, should we go then? All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right.
We have half an hour.
Half hour.
Do that one again, yeah.
We have half an hour, so.
It was a nice start. Got to see them hanging in the studio and munching away. Like half an hour to nail this. Fair enough. Yeah, really nice sort of bluesy, jazzy kind of drums. And that guitar tone, it's almost like an electric piano. And you had the synths and under behind it, they were kind of almost woozy. There's a slightly trippy feel to it. which is really nice. And I like the keyboard player, very deliberate finish at the end to drop down to the guy singing. That's funny. I'm just going to take it back a bit.
Clatter under the Fremont Bridge. I saw a pigeon fly in fear from a raptor come to take its life. And as he closed in for the capture, I followed the fear through my ancient eyes to see in flight what I know are the bitter mechanics of life. Under my hat it reads the lines of all imagined. A fact of life I know to hide from my little girl. I know my place amongst the bugs and all the animals. And it's from these ordinary people you are longing to be free. My hotel and on the TV.
So, I guess we're going back to that bit before, so I'm guessing that was like the chorusy type bit. I don't know. Yeah, really nice sort of lush sounds from the synths sort of rising up. There's a few little guitar sonics before they sort of properly kicked in. There's some interesting lyrics. So he says something about a pigeon in fear of a raptor, and then something about his little girl and knowing his place amongst the bugs and animals. Interesting. Got a handle on it yet, but words are springing up to me, trying to retain it. There's not. It's really nice sounding, but it's fairly gentle and almost soulful in a way. Yeah, I guess the lyrics are important on this. I'll try and pay attention. And again, lovely flourish from the keyboard player.
People, you are longing to be free. My hotel and on the TV, a picture on the stage like a buzzer cries out a warning. A phony sorrow is trying to get a ride. The cyanide from an almond. Let him look at your hands, get the angles right. Ace of spades, port of Morrow. Life is death is life. I saw a photograph, Cologne in 27, and then a postcard after the bombs of 45. Must have been a world of evil clowns that let it happen. But now I recognize, dear listeners, that you were there and so was I.
It's Jones.
Under my hat, I know the lines are all imagined. fact of life I must impress on my little girls. I know my place amongst the creatures in the pageant, and there are flowers in the garden, and there's a skull under your curls.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, I enjoyed that. Yeah, some interesting bits. When it went quiet the second time, the bass was really quiet, sort of plucking it. It was almost sounded like it was tiptoeing. And you got some nice little sonics from the guitar, and there was a little plinky, almost again like electric piano bit, I guess, from the synths. I like the keyboard player, and he was like almost shooting his cuffs when he was doing one bit as well. And it's like he did everything with a flourish, like a magician's assistant, like that. Drummer was really decent as well, and I liked his plastic hand, his kit. But yeah, he did some really nice fills and was getting into it, and I really liked the swirling noise at the end that sort of went into some sort of vortex. Um, and as it was going and drifting, the bass was almost counting the time down, and then you got a shot of her pedal kit, which would mean something to some. It means nothing to me. It's just like boxes and wires, but I'm sure it was like, oh, that's how she set up. But yeah, fair enough. And they just seemed to evaporate, which is a really nice ending. Um, don't think this was as good, or I didn't enjoy this as much as the Rifle Spiral, but it was still really decent. And yeah, each time I hear him, either as Broken Bells or as Shins, I'm impressed. He's thoughtful as well. The lyrics, I wrote some down. I'm gonna have to go away, but there's something about the bombs dropping in 45 and the world of evil clowns. I can't read my writing. Dear listener, that was a nice little touch there as well. So yeah, I think overall, the start had very little bits about nature and stuff. It was, I thought, was it perhaps about mortality, sort of life and death? He mentions his little girl a couple of times, and there was a line at the end about the skull beneath the coals. I think that's what I wrote down. Yeah, interesting. I think we'll have to work hard to decipher this, and the best way is going back and speaking with Andy.
Right. You're back. And how'd you enjoy this?
Yeah. It's different from the rifle spiral, definitely. Different kettle of fish, as they say, but cut from the same cloth to mix my metaphors. So it starts off with general studio hubbub, I've written down in my notes. Nice to see them refueling. And they've only got half an hour to get this take. And I'm expecting some sort of massive jam out the way they were stuffing food in they got, but refueling, but no. So then we kick off with a gentle, almost jazzy beat from the drummer. And it starts as, and then this guitar tone. Now, I put in my notes second guitar. I don't know if you call her second guitar and him, just because he's singing first guitar. Apologies, second guitar. With a tone that's all, it sounds almost like an electric piano. It's got a really nice tone to it. And when you go underneath, there's some woozy synth lines and notes that have put me in mind of raindrops or in puddles, of like coming down, but also rippling
The
out.
ripple effect, right?
Yeah. And beneath that, with the bass as well, is a very lazy, trippy feel to it. Your man starts singing now. I can't remember. I want to say Mercer, and then for some reason the name Ray, is it Ray Mercer? It's not. Is it?
No, it's James
Ray
Mercer.
Mercer. Who is Ray Mercer? Is that someone famous?
I don't know.
It kind of feels like it is, but oh. Answers to the postcard, please. To Andy, the Atlantic coast. Anyway, Mr. Mercer starts singing that familiar voice that I heard a few times before with broken bells as well. But it's just the bass and the drums. I know, and he's singing, which gives his voice more impact, which is very nice. And then behind him, I will call him the knob twiddler. I loved him because he's so funny. He was very deliberate in all of his actions. Yes,
like the
exactly.
release of the buttons, like that's just gonna burn me if I keep touching it. You know?
I did exactly that motion, the reaction. But he first of all, he kind of almost shoots his cuffs, you know, and he's ready to go. It's like, as you can see, I have nothing up this sleeve. I have nothing up this sleeve. And he has, I will call it digital ambience. There was stuff that was, you know, synthy sounding, but also stuff that was string sounding as well. And this sort of old ambience, to me, sounded like clouds scuttling across the sky. And at that moment, Mr. Mercer sings something about a pigeon in fear of a raptor. So it was appropriate whether the words hit before the image in my head or after. But anyway, it all worked. So the keyboards rise and swirl, and second guitar comes back, so just treading bits here and there. And after a very deliberate tweak of the wrists, the keyboards disappear. Presto, piff puff puff. And we go back to that sparse arrangement. So I'm figuring that must have been the chorus. Catch the, and then it repeats later on, so it definitely is. I catch the word buzzard as well, and I go, what's with all these birds? But there's a more sort of orchestral synth sounding, and nice drum fills coming in. It comes in like installments. It's like his drum fill. It's, you know, the last bit's in the post. You know, you get them weekly. It was really sort of elongated. But all of this again is more trippy and quite soulful feel to this as well, actually. And I didn't catch. I was really listening to the music. I didn't catch most of the lyrics, but he did say a line which, because, well, it just stuck in my head. Ace of Spades, Port of Morrow. Life is death is life. And I'm thinking, what's Lemmy got to do with this? But obviously he's talking about the symbolism of the playing card, which is known as the death card, obviously. I do not know what Port of Morrow is, whether it's real or not, but tomorrow is obviously can be used as tomorrow or fate or beyond on the morrow. So a port would be a gateway to whatever. What comes next, I guess you would say. So this is making me think this is about mortality. he does mention his little girl, like 2 or 3 times. It's almost like he started thinking about her or conversation. I think it's like thinking about her. And kids make you think of your own mortality as well, I guess. Then we get this rising chorus again, and there are some more interesting lyrics and only because there's a couple of things really. Well, one line popped out to me, and then I managed to catch some more. But something about after the bombs in 45, which is obviously a very direct reference to Hiroshima, etc. And something about a world of evil clowns. And then he says something. He uses the line "dear listeners," which is very Jane Austen, and but I like that as well. Sort of involving you in there, like he's now recognizing the narration,
kind of breaking the fourth wall or something like that,
Yes.
right?
He says something about you were there and so was I, which means so breaking that down. Obviously, the decision for mass destruction, by a world of evil clowns is actually the world that we've made. And we should all take responsibility and not just say, isn't it terrible what these people over there have done? The ones that we put into power and gave the authority to do that. And we're really shocked when they actually do it. So, yeah, something like that, I guess. He then begins to vocalize, and they're joined by the other members of the band vocalizing as well. And the music rises and drum fills abound, I've written. There was loads of little bits. Then, just as the synth starts to sound like helicopter blades, it's only about 2 seconds. Woof, woof. The guitar bends a lovely note into another drop down, and we're back down to just the drums and bass. But this time, there's a little bit of snare action, I think, on the drums, which also gives it straight away. I always think military as soon as I hear the snare drum. Just it is what it is.
Yeah, marching, right?
Either that or you too. And the bass sounds like it's tiptoeing, picking away, and there's plinking keys as well. And then I got a line about fact of life, little girl, and then flowers in the garden and the skull under your curls, which is a charming little line. More sort of obviously death image. And
Yes.
perhaps he's worrying about the mortality either himself in relation to his little girl or even the mortality of her. We're all going to die. Suck it up. Anyway, back to vocalizing again, and this time the band sort of jams out and it just rises and goes on. It's crescendo and off. Great work from the drummer. I mean, really, really nice. It's really nice strident work from the second guitar as well. Before we go into this sort of washing machine of noise with reverb and feedback, and as it's doing that, the bass is sort of counting or marking it's really, really, and then it all just seems to evaporate, like spilt sunny delight on a summer's day. I really like the keyboard player stroke digital manipulator. As I say, he did everything with a flourish, like a magician's assistant. The drummer was really, really good. I think in total, I enjoyed the Rifle's Spiral a touch more, but it's just a touch. I enjoyed this as well a lot. It was a slightly different sound, and probably with a couple more listens, I may enjoy it just as much or even more. I think every time I see Mr. Mercer, though, every time I see him, brackets, insert name here, with either Broken Bells or the Shins, I'm impressed with both his craft and his thoughtfulness. So every song makes you sort of think about stuff as well, which is a real talent. And it's serious without being po-faced as well. It's enjoyable. So yeah, again, really good song. Really good song.
Awesome. I'm glad you liked it. And you said craft. I think the great way to describe Mercer is a musical craftsman. Like, he's very good at assembling these songs, and whether it's his lyrics that, like you said, aren't so ham-handed or over the top that it makes you roll your eyes. Like sometimes, I don't know, Bono can be like that sometimes, you know what I mean? But with Mercer, I don't know, there's more elegance to it, or he's just broad enough for you have to do to leave you to interpret, and then when you do there's a bigger payoff, I think, for the lyricism, and yeah, just the overall sound and quality. All the musicians on this track really are carrying their weight, and yeah, I'm a big fan.
And I meant to say, sorry, and I don't remember it from previous videos. I like the plastic hand on the drum kit.
Okay, yes. Who doesn't? But yeah, let me get into the band a little bit more. Like we've mentioned, we've covered them before, so I don't want to get too much on the band. I'll just do a little recapping, then kind of get into this album and so on. But yeah, they are from, or formed in, I should say, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 1996. They're headed up by the one and only constant member from their inception, James Mercer. And they are now based out of Portland, Oregon. Port of Morrow is the title track off their fourth album, and that came out in March 19th, 2012. The lineup featured on this album consists of Mercer on vocals, guitars, additional drums, glockenspiel, lap steel guitar, and percussions. Greg Kirsten on keyboards, guitars, bass, piano, organ, percussions, drums, and Joe Plummer on drums, as well as Ron Lewis on bass. Additional artists who appeared on the album include Dave Hernandez on lead guitar, Eric D. Johnson on piano, backing vocals, additional keyboards, Janet Weiss on drums, Nick Freitas on lead guitar, Marty Crandall on additional keyboards, and Nathaniel Walcott on trumpet and flugelhorn. Jessica Dobson and Richard Swift play with the band during this performance on the guitar and the keyboards, respectively. So there are some names to some faces who I think they both kind of stood out to you. I know you really liked her work on the Rifle Spiral as well.
Yeah.
A lot of her pedal manipulations and sound she was creating. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, yes, I forgot to. I did mention the reaction. You get a nice shot of her sort of pedal kit. I said on that, I'm sure it means a lot to some people. It's just wires to me, but for the devoted, oh yeah, she's got it set up that way, and they lingered on it quite a bit, didn't they? Just
she's obviously got a love for pedal boards and cheese boards, as the beginning would suggest, as she'd gone up to 2 or 3 pieces before going over to perform. I was like, I like her. She's cool. Because who doesn't like cheese? So in 2007, the Shins released their third studio album, Wincing the Night Away, which received rave reviews from critics and debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. The album spawned a year-long tour and snagged a Grammy nomination for Best Alternative Music Album. And having worked on the Shins for nearly a decade, frontman James Mercer felt exhausted afterward and was ready to quit the band. A quote, mainly I was tired of being right in the middle and everything sort of revolving around me, including the friendship dynamics / bandmate dynamics and the creative aspect. He said this in 2012. Noting that the band had never been bigger, some aspects of the limelight made him uncomfortable. Another quote, I had never been someone who was ever in the center of any kind of social circle. Mercer was approached by Brian Burton, Danger Mouse, around the same period of time regarding the possibility of collaboration on a new project, which was being called Broken Bells. You alluded to this earlier. We've covered them on this channel. Mercer was initially intimidated to commit to the project, but felt differently after attending the memorial service of actor Heath Ledger in 2008. Mercer felt very shy in contrast to Ledger. He had observed Ledger was very engaged in conversation and held deep relationships. Noting that the outpouring of emotion at the service changed him, Mercer decided to change his pace and began saying yes to new experiences, enjoying the fresh approach to Broken Bells in regards to meeting new musicians. Mercer desired to continue that feeling. When Mercer made a comment to NME that he was drawn to Broken Bells because the Shins had started to feel heavy, fans of the big band began to speculate that perhaps the band was over. And working with Burton on Broken Bells helped Mercer overcome fear of collaboration, which in turn influenced the rotating cast of characters that he grouped together around him to record Port of Morrow. So Port of Morrow is more of this really, the laundry list of names I alluded to a moment ago kind of suggests. He took this more as like not like a band that was codified in concrete, rather him bringing in all these different talented musicians to create this next album under the Shins moniker. So Mercer returned to the Shins as the only original member. I always loved these auteurs who presented themselves as band, Mercer later explained, referencing Neutral Milk Hotel and the Lilies as examples, which led him feeling as though he could pursue something similar, allowing the concept of the Shins to carry on. For Port of Morrow, the Shins left their longtime label Sub Pop for Mercer's own label, Aural Apothecary. Producer Greg Kurstin, who appeared on the album as a musician, had a particular influence on Port of Morrow, encouraging Mercer to experiment in the studio. During the recording, Mercer was commuting each week, flying from Portland to Los Angeles to record with Kurstin at his studio. While working on the album, Mercer felt he might have waited too long to record a follow-up, fearing that he might be in a similar situation as the Stone Roses, whose reputation sort of fell apart when they waited 5 years to record a sophomore record. Port of Morrow incorporates a palette of vintage-inspired sounds inspired by Mercer and producer Greg Kurstin's upbringing in Germany in the 1970s. The German imagery found on Port of Morrow was inspired by avant-garde pop artists such as Faust and Can, as well as Brian Eno's production work. Man, I'm just naming all kinds of artists we've talked about on this channel. An instrumental break in Fall of '82, for example, features a trumpet solo performed by Nathaniel Walcott. The vintage element was inspired by bands such as Steely Dan in Chicago. Span called Port of Morrow a brighter, poppier beast than previous ventures, filled with spacey 70s keyboards and surprisingly straightforward lyrics. I would argue that that's a song-to-song basis. The instrumental arrangement on Port of Morrow are highly layered, which is an extension of Mercer's desire to make the songs as interesting and as engaging as possible. Port of Morrow was released to generally favorable reviews from music critics. Pace was arguably the most positive, calling the record just so utterly satisfying, elaborating that Port of Morrow immediately hooks the listener and holds on right up until the last few seconds. The Boston Phoenix called it arguably Mercer's and the Shins' most satisfying achievement. Entertainment Weekly heralded it as the band's best album in nearly a decade, and Q called Port of Morrow an album rich in kaleidoscopic color to contrast the diluted grays of its sleeve, marked with the expert touch of true masters of their art. Mercer has stated in interviews that the main themes on Port of Morrow include love, inspired by his newfound domestic life and fatherhood, and the dual nature of life, the beautiful and the grotesque, being intertwined. So let's jump into these lyrics. Through the rain and all the clatter, under the Fremont Bridge I saw a pigeon fly in fear from the raptor come to take its life. As it closed in for the capture, funneled the fear through my ancient eyes, see in flight what I know are the bitter mechanics of life. Under my hat it reads, the lines are all imagined, a fact of life I know to hide from my little girls. I know my place amongst the bugs and all the animals, and it's from these ordinary people you are longing to be free. My hotel and on the TV, a preacher on the stage like a buzzard cries, out a warning, phony sorrow, he's trying to get a rise. The cyanide of an almond, let him look at your hands, get the angles right. Ace of spades, Port of Morrow, life is death is life. I saw a photograph, Cologne in 27, and then a postcard after the bombs in 45. Must have been a world of evil clowns that let it happen. But now I recognize, dear listeners, that But now I recognize, dear listeners, that you were there and so was I. Under my hat, I know the lines are all imagined. A fact of life I must impress on my little girls. I know the place among the creatures in the pageant, and there are flowers in the garbage, a skull under your curls. And then those are the lyrics. So, the album's title track, Port of Morrow, is named after an industrial port site on the Columbia River in Boardman, Morrow County, Oregon. The track ends symbolically the musical journey that the band embarked on throughout the album. This is a quote, Port of Morrow, you know, I don't know too much about what the actual place is, Mercer said to Spinner about the titular port of call. I know it's an industrial port here in Portland, Oregon, and the end of every tour when we return home from Portland in Eastern Oregon, you pass this little sign and it says Port of Morrow. And it's something about the mood that you're in at the end of the tour and just the strange evocative nature of that phrase. It ended up being a line in the song Port of Morrow that, to me, he added, ended up symbolizing the exit point of everyone's life, which is death. So that's what Port of Morrow is about: death and mortality, and understanding that's what awaits you, and the strange dichotomy of life. Everything being beautiful and engaging and fascinating and wonderful, but also very dark. Mercer concluded, I think that's something in the last few years that I've come to realize. The strong artistic experiences are always coupled. There's always a moment of beauty with its fragile and transient nature. So yeah, you were pretty much spot on. It's this, I guess it's about, because yeah, Port of Morrow does suggest like port of like, here we are embarking on what's next, right? But it also is this actual place, and he kind of, I guess that experience of leaving one part of his life to return to another also evokes this idea of transcending or moving on, and it all got whipped up into this really interesting song about life and death. And that line about there being the last line about there being a skull under your curls is very interesting to me, because as you said, he's grappling with his own mortality, but what's the next phase in that? You look at the life you've created and realize, oh, this kid is going to be an adult at some point and be going through the same sort of interesting dilemma that I'm going through, or conundrum that I'm struggling with right now, which is mortality. Really cool.
It's just it's a point of view though, isn't it? Because other creatures crawling around on this planet don't think that way.
No.
A skull is just, a barrier to meaty goodness inside. And we associate the skull with death, whereas actually it's an essential part of our makeup,
Life.
which protects us.
Yeah.
Protects our brain. You mentioned in the lyrics, was it Fremont Bridge?
Yes.
I think for some reason, it feels like I've heard of that. Is that real? And do you know where that is?
Yeah, the Fremont Bridge is in Portland, Oregon, but I've never been to it or seen it or anything like that.
It's his hometown. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is interesting because you're talking about, you pointed out, which I'm sure Mercer knew too and wanted to make reference to in the song, that animals don't deal with this. They don't go through this. And here we are watching an animal fly for its life from like a red-tailed hawk or something like that, this pigeon. And he's going through the emotional struggle that you would think the pigeon would. Yeah. It's just trying to fucking
live. Time to go, oh, woe is me.
Yeah.
What's that going to mean?
With it. Right,
Get the
exactly.
fuck out of here before I'm eating.
yeah. That's the sum and totality of it, the experience for the pigeon. But for Mercer, who has emotions and all these added things that humans are either gifted with or encumbered by, he's sort of experiencing it outside of the pigeon, which is really interesting and funny, and I guess human nature. The same way he's looking back at Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all that stuff in his later references as it relates to humans. Just very observational and really kind of poetic the way it's penned, and I really appreciate those lyrics. And I thought, man, I'd love to get some stuff from the basement on here, because it's like another one of these platforms where you just get really great live performances, which we've tried to bring, whether it's like a Peel session or Jules Holland or shows on Letterman or KEXP, Audio Tree, all these great avenues for music.
I didn't even mention what a fantastic live performance it was. I mean, when it's so good and they're in this close place with no audience, you kind of forget that they're just playing it in one take live. It's like
no, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for giving this track a go. I'm a really big, this was almost oddly, at the time I remember it being oddly polarizing for Shins fans, because they wanted what they were getting earlier from the Shins, and that this was kind of a different sound a little bit for them. Everybody just wants Garden State Shins, and that's it. But there's so many great other great albums by them and music by them. So
I wasn't a fan of that.
No,
Really.
wow, interesting. Well, I guess over here from
Yeah.
our standpoint in the States, I don't know how it, or just the difference between you and me rather than the difference between how the UK
This
received
is
it
a
versus
lot
the States.
better than that.
Yeah,
Lot
yeah. No, this is actually my favorite album by them, and it's only grown to be more. It's my assuredness in that statement has only grown over time. The more I go back and listen to this album, I really, really do enjoy it a lot. So thanks for giving it a listen, guys out there in the listening audience. Let us know what you thought of Port of Morrow the song or Port of Morrow the album, if you're familiar with it. The Shins in general, James Mercer. And his different projects. I'm a really big fan. As the channel is probably evidence of that. But yeah, drop what you think down in the comments field below. We love interacting with you guys and seeing y'all interact with one another. Also, please think about doing any or all of the following: like, share, and subscribe. If you haven't done any of them to this point, we really do appreciate it. We're trying to grow the channel. We cannot do that without you. So thank you kindly. And hopefully, John and I will see all y'all in growing numbers on the next episode of the Audiophiles. See you later, guys.